Could you have become a prodigy? Yeah, I'm looking at you who's watching this video from your bed. You're probably a former gifted child who's burned out. I get it. I've been there. But I think it's still really interesting to take a look at what makes a prodigy. Could you have become one? And how you can even apply those skills that they have now in your everyday life. And when I say prodigy, I mean people like this. This 3-year-old is an internationally ranked chess player. This 10-year-old graduated from college. This 4-year-old speaks 7 languages. What makes a child prodigy? This is not going to be a lecture on nature versus nurture. We all know that being a prodigy is a combination of several factors, including your genetics, how you're raised, your luck, all of the above. But this is not a video about that. Instead, I want to focus on the particular traits that cause someone to become a prodigy and how anyone can improve them. So one very common misconception about prodigies is that they have genius IQs. This could not be further from the truth. I'm going to talk about a little bit of research. This is done by Joanne Rusatz from Ohio State University. Sorry for probably mispronouncing that name, but doing my best here. They studied a bunch of prodigies. And this is a pretty small sample size because prodigies are not numerous, but they did find that there was a wide variety of IQs from, standard to genius to everything in between and under. It really did not make a difference for who was a prodigy. Also, interestingly enough, they followed the outcomes in 1980 from a school, I believe it was Hunter College, where in order to get in, a kid had to be of genius IQ 150 and above. So they followed their progress to see what they did in adulthood. None of the graduates really ended up doing anything spectacular. None of them were prize winners or anything really crazy. They were all just pretty average people. So this begs the question, if IQ is not a huge factor in prodigies, what is? And now there are 2 main things that they have found, which is attention to detail and high working memory. These are a little bit of nature versus nurture. I know we said we wouldn't talk about it, but there is a certain predisposition that allows you to be better at this. However, it is also something that can be improved. And a little later on in this video, we'll do a test to see how your working memory is, and then also talk about a little bit of the techniques to improve it, because this is a huge factor in prodigies. Also, interestingly enough, it seems odd that there is even a common link between prodigies, because prodigies aren't just a one-size-fits-all. There are prodigies in many different areas. For, my field particularly, there's a lot of chess prodigies. The 3-year-old we talked about who's internationally ranked. I mean, I didn't even know if I had consciousness at 3 years old, but it's kind of insane. There's also music prodigies, art prodigies, you see math prodigies all of the time. And each of these prodigies kind of has something different. For example, math prodigies, it's been shown that they actually use a different part of their brain for calculation than the general public. Another thing all prodigies had in common was a desire to learn. This is something my old softball coach called fire in the belly. And they really said this is something you can't teach, it's just innate. And that tends to be what science suggests too, although I don't know if I completely agree with that. I do think there's something about fostering your love for certain things that you are able to build up this desire. But it is true that prodigies, they have this passion to learn that really helps propel them through the learning of the skills that they need. No one is born having these skills innately, but some people are born with the passion to learn them and maybe even the tools to learn them a little bit faster. That being said, interestingly enough, there's an observed incidence of higher rates of autism in prodigies than the general public. According to, again, Rusatz, 56% of prodigies had at least one first or second degree relative with ASD. Of those families, 33% had multiple relatives with ASD. So that's a direct quote from her research, and we'll explore possible reasons why this could be. Most likely, I would assume it would be due to, attention to detail, working memory. Those are 2 things that we have talked about that make prodigies. Now, the hypothesis that anyone can be a prodigy is not new. In fact, some people have even sought to prove it with their own kids. This is a case study of Laszlo Polgar and his 3 daughters, and he believed that anyone could raise geniuses if you just put them in the right environment. He sought to prove that with, again, his 3 daughters. So he didn't actually care what subject they really went into. This was not a One Tree Hill situation, you know. He did not want them to pursue his dreams. In fact, one of the sisters, the oldest one, Susan, she looked at doing math before chess, and then he wanted her to choose between them, and she decided on chess. In fact, all three of the daughters ended up choosing chess. Now, this might be because they saw their oldest sister doing it and wanted to do it as well, but all of them decided to focus and study on chess. So one thing in particular is that unlike a lot of childhood education, which really focuses on bringing kids to a lot of different interests and passions and having them explore it, these kids were focused on one thing in particular, which prodigies often need to do. Now, I'm not saying this is the best way to raise a kid, but this is just how it's done for making prodigies. They can't be focused on a bunch of things and still be able to be so exceptional at one single topic. These kids were taught, educated at home, focused on this, you know. They also had some enjoyment to their lives. They would go out for movies, they had some physical education, but it definitely was a very, very focused childhood. Now, let's talk about what happened to these girls. The oldest one ended up becoming a grandmaster at chess, so she's still a very, very strong player, runs educational programs, but there are not a lot of women who are grandmasters in chess. And especially back in the day when this was done, there were pretty much none, honestly. Like, they were one of the first. And then there was the middle daughter. Her name was Sophia, and she was very, very smart, very good at chess. She ended up becoming an international master and had one of the highest performance ratings in a tournament ever. So incredibly gifted, but she ended up not pursuing chess long term. I believe she does art now. And then Judith Polgar, who, if any of you guys are in the chess sphere, if you're watching this video or you follow me or you subscribe, you probably are in the chess sphere. You definitely have heard of her. She was number 7 in the world, highest rated woman of all time. And all of these girls were prodigies. They became gifted exceptionally early, all under 10, all incredibly high ranked for any child. In fact, I think they even broke the record. I think it was Judith who broke the record for the youngest grandmaster of any gender of all time. You could say this is all due to genetics, but at a certain point, I think it does play a role to be able to have some sort of focused passion. And this can also be applied to adulthood. You know, if you are spreading your focus around so many different disciplines and aspects, you're going to become very well-rounded, but you might not excel at a certain discipline or aspect. You know, being able to put all of your energy into one thing and pursue it single-mindedly is what creates greatness. Let's go back to the traits to become a prodigy and how you can improve them. We've talked about passion, attention to detail. Now there's working memory. Working memory is your ability to recall things on a short-term basis. Let's do a working memory test. Now feel free to pause the video, take your time. I'm gonna say a string of numbers and I want you to try to remember them, okay? 9, 6, 5, 4, 8, 2, 7, 9, 3. Okay. Now try to repeat those numbers. You can pause, see if you can say it in your head. If that's easy, try to recall them backwards. Okay, I'll repeat the numbers one more time. 965 482 793. Try to keep this in your head till the end of the video. This test is meant to be hard, and it may be a matter of technique whether you succeeded or not. There's actually a way to do this that becomes much easier because humans, they can only keep a set amount of information in their brain at one time. So this is why the technique known as information chunks, or putting information into chunks, is very useful for helping improve your working memory and even helping you train to have a better working memory. Since we are only able to recall a certain amount of information at a time, I think it's about 4, putting it in chunks really helps. And what this means is grouping together smaller pieces of information into something larger. For example, let's do it with the numbers. We have our numbers 965 482 793. You can actually chunk this into 333. So let's look at it again using that information. 965, first chunk. 482, 793. Now, if you try to remember that clump of information as a singular unit, it's going to become much easier. 965, all one. 482, 793. That should be so much easier, and if you practice and learn these techniques, you'll be able to start improving your working memory. And it is proven that you can improve your working memory. It is not something you're born with. This is super helpful because I'm someone with ADHD, and when I got tested for ADHD, they found I had a pretty bad working memory. So I've been actively trying to help with this. I've been trying to work on my active memory recall. Honestly, I think that is something that's very important for daily life, not just in becoming a prodigy, but being able to pursue your passions. Working memory is incredibly underrated. This is also not something you should try to brute force. The techniques will help. It's all about learning how to work smarter, not harder. That being said, going back to the reason we clicked on this video, there are things that people can do to help improve their skills of learning, to help them behave more like a prodigy. I just want to also point out that child genius does not necessarily equal success. We've heard of gifted child burnout. You know, a lot of gifted children don't actually end up being gifted adults. In fact, there was a study, you can look at Malcolm Gladwell, who did a lot of work with this, but they took adult geniuses and traced it backwards, and they found that only out of 200 gifted adults, only 36% were considered prodigies or considered gifted as a kid. That is not a high percentage, so even if you're not a prodigy, you can still become a gifted adult. Now that you're done with the video, please like and subscribe if you enjoyed it, leave a comment, and try to recall the numbers I told you earlier, and let me know if you could in the comments below.